The rain hammered against the windows of Admiral Marcus Steele's office at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. He stared at the classified file spread across his mahogany desk, his weathered face creased with concern. The operation in Yemen had gone sideways fast, and his best SEAL team was pinned down in hostile territory with no clear extraction route. Lieutenant Sarah Chun knocked on his doorframe. Her crisp Navy uniform perfectly pressed, despite working 80-hour days. She had been his aide for 6 months now, handling logistics and communications with the efficiency that made Steele's demanding schedule manageable. What he didn't know was that Sarah carried secrets that could change everything. "Sir, we have updates from Team 7, she said, entering with a tablet displaying real-time satellite feeds. "The situation has deteriorated. They're surrounded by enemy forces in a compound outside Sana'a. Weather conditions are preventing air support, and the nearest friendly units are 12 hours away." Steele rubbed his temples. Team 7 consisted of 8 of his most experienced operators, led by Commander Jake Morrison, a man Steele had personally trained 15 years ago. They had been conducting a high-value target capture mission when intelligence failures left them exposed to a much larger enemy force than anticipated. "What are our options?" Steele asked, though he suspected he already knew the grim answer. Sarah pulled up tactical displays on her tablet. "Limited, sir. The storm system will persist for another 6 hours. Drone support is minimal due to the weather. The team has adequate ammunition for maybe 2 more hours of sustained contact." Steele stood and walked to the large window overlooking the Pacific. In 30 years of naval service, he had made countless difficult decisions, but losing an entire team of America's finest warriors was not something he could accept. Not when there might be another way? "Sir," Sarah said quietly, "there is one possibility we haven't considered." He turned back to face her. Despite her relatively junior rank, Sarah had demonstrated remarkable tactical insight during her time as his aide. She had a way of seeing solutions that others missed, though Steele attributed this to her intelligence background before transferring to administrative duties. "I'm listening," he said. Sarah moved closer to his desk and began manipulating the satellite display. "The compound is surrounded by elevated positions that provide perfect overwatch of the entire area. If we could neutralize the enemy positions on those ridgelines, it would create a corridor for extraction." Steele studied the terrain. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills dotted with enemy fighting positions. Sarah was right that controlling the high ground would change everything, but the logistics seemed impossible. "Even if we could get assets in position, the visibility is near zero," Steele pointed out. "The storm has reduced effective range for any marksman to maybe 300 meters. And that's optimistic." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes studying the display with an intensity that made Steele pause. There was something in her expression he had never seen before, a calculating look that seemed completely at odds with her administrative role. "Sir, what if I told you there was someone who could make those shots in these conditions?" Steele raised an eyebrow. "I'd say you're talking about a mythical figure. The kind of marksman you're describing doesn't exist, Lieutenant. We're talking about precision shots at extended range in near-zero visibility conditions." Sarah moved to the secure communication station and pulled up personnel files. "Admiral, I need to share something with you that's been classified at the highest levels. My assignment as your aide wasn't random." Steele felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. In 3 decades of military service, he had learned that when someone prefaced a statement like that, everything was about to change. "What exactly are you telling me, Lieutenant?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Before my assignment here, I completed a classified training program that doesn't officially exist. My specialty isn't administration, sir. It's precision marksmanship under extreme conditions." Steele stared at her, trying to reconcile the efficient aide he had worked with for months with what she was suggesting. "You're telling me you're some kind of special operations sniper?" "Not exactly, sir. The program I completed was designed to identify individuals with exceptional spatial processing abilities and train them for impossible shots. We called it the Ghost Protocol. I'm the only graduate who's still active. Steele moved back to his desk and sat heavily in his chair. The file in front of him contained the service records of 8 men who were running out of time. And now his aide was claiming to possess capabilities that sounded more like science fiction than military reality. "Prove it," he said simply. Sarah nodded and moved to Steele's secure phone. "Sir, I need you to call Master Chief Peterson at the sniper school. Tell him you need information about Project Nightfall from 2018 when he asks for verification. Give him the code word Shadowfire." Steele made the call, and after a tense 5-minute conversation filled with verification protocols and careful questions, he hung up with a completely different understanding of the woman standing in his office. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Peterson says you hold the record for the longest confirmed kill shot in adverse weather conditions. He also says the details are so classified he can't discuss them over the phone, even on a secure line." Sarah moved back to the tactical display. The record was set during a training exercise in Alaska during a blizzard. The target was neutralized at a range of 2,847 meters, with winds gusting to 45 knots and visibility under 50 meters. Steele stood up again, his mind racing through possibilities. "Even if what you're saying is true, we're talking about deploying a single operator into a hostile zone to provide overwatch for an extraction. The risk assessment is off the charts. Sir, with respect, 8 men are going to die if we don't try something. I can be inserted via halo jump above the cloud cover and be in position within 90 minutes. Once I neutralize the enemy positions, a helicopter can extract the team during the confusion." Steele walked to his map wall and studied the terrain around the compound. The plan was audacious and dangerous, but it was also the only viable option they had. Team 7 was composed of men with families, men he had personally recruited and trained. The thought of losing them due to intelligence failures and bad weather was unacceptable. "What do you need?" he asked. Sarah was already moving toward the door. "A transport to the armory weather gear rated for the conditions and clearance to access my specialized equipment. I also need a C-130, prepped for immediate departure, and a pilot who's comfortable with adverse weather insertions." Steele reached for his phone. "Lieutenant Chun, if this works, you'll have earned a commendation that I can never officially acknowledge. If it fails?" Sarah paused at the door and turned back to him. "Sir, it won't fail. Those men down there are counting on us to bring them home. I've never missed a shot when lives were on the line." As she left his office, Steele found himself staring at the personnel file he had never really examined closely. Sarah Chun, 28 years old, born in San Francisco to immigrant parents. Graduated summa cum laude from MIT with a degree in physics before joining the Navy. Her official record showed assignment to various intelligence units before her current position, but now Steele understood that her real career had been hidden behind layers of classification. He picked up his secure phone and began making calls. Within minutes, he had set in motion a chain of events that would either save 8 American lives or add a 9th casualty to an already tragic situation. As he coordinated with various commands, Steele found himself wondering what other secrets were hidden among his staff. The storm continued to rage outside. But for the first time since receiving word of Team 7's predicament, Steele felt a glimmer of hope. If Sarah Chun was even half as capable as her classified record suggested, they might just pull off the impossible. He only hoped that the young woman who had quietly managed his schedule for 6 months was ready for the most challenging shot of her career. The cargo bay of the C-130, Hercules shuddered as it climbed through the storm clouds above the Arabian Peninsula. Sarah Chun sat alone in the dim red lighting, checking her equipment for the 3rd time. The specialized rifle case beside her contained a weapon that officially didn't exist. Custom-built for the Ghost Protocol program and designed for precision beyond conventional limitations. Through her headset, she could hear the pilot coordinating with various air traffic controllers, using call signs and frequencies that would never appear in official flight logs. This entire mission existed in the shadowy space between acknowledged military operations and plausible deniability. 10 minutes to drop zone, the pilot's voice crackled through her headset. Weather update shows the storm is intensifying at ground level, but we've got a clear corridor at altitude. Sarah stood and began her final equipment check. The custom ghillie suit was designed for desert operations but modified with materials that would help her blend with the rocky terrain around the compound. Her rifle, a heavily modified version of the military's standard sniper system, included experimental optics that could process multiple spectrum inputs to create targeting solutions in near-zero visibility. The mission plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah would high-low jump from 25,000 feet, land on the highest ridgeline overlooking the compound, and systematically eliminate the enemy positions that had Team 7 pinned down. Once the Overwatch threat was neutralized, extraction helicopters could move in during the confusion. What made the plan nearly impossible was the weather. The storm had reduced visibility at ground level to less than 50 meters, and winds were gusting unpredictably through the mountain valleys. Traditional sniper doctrine would consider such conditions unsuitable for precision fire. But Sarah had trained for exactly these scenarios. She thought about the conversation she'd had with Admiral Steele before departure. He had looked at her with a mixture of hope and skepticism that was familiar to anyone who had dealt with classified programs that pushed the boundaries of believability. "Lieutenant, I need to ask you directly," Steele had said. "Can you really make these shots in these conditions?" Sarah had met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I've never told anyone outside the program about this, but I see things differently than most people. Patterns in wind movement, micro-variations in atmospheric density, the way sound bounces off terrain features. The instructors called it an anomaly, but it's how I process the environment around me." Steele had nodded slowly. "And this ability is what allowed you to excel in the Ghost protocol?" "The program didn't create the ability, sir. It just taught me how to use it. Most people see a storm and think about chaos and unpredictability. I see patterns and opportunities." Now, as the C-130 approached the drop zone, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came before a challenging shot. Her breathing slowed, and her mind began processing the environmental factors that would affect her mission. Altitude, barometric pressure, temperature gradients, wind patterns at different elevations, all of it formed a complex three-dimensional puzzle that her brain seemed uniquely equipped to solve. 5 minutes to drop," the pilot announced. "Ground control reports Team 7 is still holding position, but ammunition is running critically low." Sarah moved to the jump door and connected her static line. Through her headset, she could hear radio chatter from the compound below. Commander Morrison's voice was calm but tense as he coordinated his team's defensive positions. 8 of America's finest warriors were counting on her to do something that conventional wisdom said was impossible. The jump door opened, and Sarah was immediately hit by the full force of the storm system. Even at 25,000 feet, the turbulence was severe enough to make the aircraft shudder. Below, she could see nothing but angry clouds illuminated by lightning flashes. "Drop zone in 30 seconds, the pilot called out. Weather station reports surface winds, gusting to 50 knots from multiple directions. Sarah adjusted her equipment one final time and moved to the edge of the jump door. The modified altimeter on her wrist showed altitude, descent rate, and projected landing coordinates based on current wind conditions. The mathematics of the jump were complex, but her mind processed them automatically. 10 seconds. Sarah took one last look at the GPS coordinates for her target landing zone. A small rocky outcrop approximately 1,200 meters from the compound. Elevated enough to provide clear sight lines to the enemy positions while offering concealment from ground-level observation. Go! Sarah stepped into the storm and immediately felt the full fury of the weather system. The wind caught her like a giant hand, pushing her in directions that no amount of training could fully prepare for. She maintained stable body position as best she could, using her hands and feet to make minor corrections to her trajectory. At 15,000 feet, she deployed her main chute and immediately had to fight to maintain control. The parachute canopy bucked and twisted in the conflicting wind currents, threatening to collapse entirely. Sarah used every technique she had learned in airborne training, working the control lines to keep the chute inflated, While trying to navigate toward her target landing zone, through the storm, she caught glimpses of the terrain below. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills, exactly as the satellite images had shown. She could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions, confirming that the firefight was still ongoing. Team 7 was running out of time. At 5,000 feet, Sarah began her final approach to the landing zone. The wind had pushed her slightly off course, but she could see the rocky outcrop that was her destination. It was smaller than it had appeared in the satellite images, barely large enough for a safe landing, but it was positioned perfectly for engaging the enemy positions. Sarah hit the ground hard, the rocky terrain and high winds combining to create a landing that tested every bone in her body. She quickly gathered her parachute and moved to a concealed position among the rocks. The storm provided excellent cover for her insertion, but it would also make her primary mission exponentially more difficult. She unpacked her rifle and began assembling the specialized optics system. The weapon itself was a work of art, precision machined to tolerances that most manufacturers couldn't achieve. The optics package included thermal imaging, millimeter wave radar, and acoustic processing capabilities that could detect and track targets in conditions where traditional scopes would be useless. Through her earpiece, she could hear the increasingly desperate radio chatter from Team 7. Commander Morrison was calling for immediate extraction, reporting that they were down to their last magazines and had multiple wounded. The enemy forces had moved closer under cover of the storm, tightening the noose around the Americans. Sarah powered up her optics system and began her first scan of the enemy positions. The advanced sensors painted a complex picture of the battlefield below. Multiple heat signatures on the surrounding ridgelines, muzzle flash patterns that revealed firing positions, and movement signatures that showed enemy forces maneuvering for a final assault. She identified 12 separate enemy positions arranged in a semicircle around the compound. Each position contained between 2 and 4 fighters, meaning she was looking at neutralizing approximately 35 to 40 enemy combatants. In perfect conditions with unlimited time, such a mission would be challenging but achievable. In the current weather, it bordered on impossible. Sarah settled into her firing position and began calculating her first shot. The target was an enemy machine gun nest approximately 800 meters away, positioned to prevent any helicopter approach to the compound. Through her advanced optics, she could see 3 fighters manning the position, with one operating a heavy machine gun that was methodically raking Team 7's defensive positions. She adjusted her scope for wind speed, direction, humidity, and the dozen other factors that would affect bullet trajectory over that distance. The wind was gusting unpredictably, but Sarah's enhanced spatial processing allowed her to see patterns in the chaos. She waited for the right moment. When the wind patterns aligned with her calculations, the shot broke clean, and through her scope, Sarah watched the enemy machine gunner slump forward. The other 2 fighters in the position immediately began searching for the source of the shot, but the storm made it impossible to determine where it had come from. Sarah was already calculating her second shot before they had time to react. Sarah's breathing remained steady as she worked through the enemy positions with methodical precision. Each shot required complex calculations that most snipers would need computers to process, but her mind seemed to handle the mathematics automatically. Wind speed at different elevations, bullet drop over varying distances, target movement patterns. All of it formed a 3-dimensional puzzle that she solved. Instinctively, the second enemy position fell within 30 seconds of the first. A sniper team positioned on a rocky outcrop, 650 meters to the southeast, had been systematically targeting Team 7's defensive positions. Sarah's shot took the primary shooter center mass, and the spotter never had time to identify her location before her follow-up shot eliminated him as well. Through her earpiece, she could hear the change in radio chatter from the compound below. Commander Morrison's voice carried a note of cautious hope as the enemy fire slackened noticeably. "Control, this is 7 Actual," Morrison transmitted. "We're seeing significant reduction in effective enemy fire. Unknown friendly assets appear to be engaging hostiles from elevated positions. Request immediate extraction support while the corridor is open. Admiral Steele's voice came through the communication network from Coronado. 7 actual extraction assets are inbound. Maintain current positions and prepare for immediate extraction. Sarah shifted her position slightly and began engaging the third enemy nest. This one was more challenging. 4 fighters positioned in a natural rock formation that provided excellent cover and concealment. The range was nearly 900 meters, and the wind was gusting unpredictably through the valley below. She waited for a pattern in the wind, watching dust and debris swirl in ways that revealed the air currents. The advanced optics painted a thermal picture of the battlefield, showing her exactly where each enemy fighter was positioned despite the limited visibility. One of them was moving, trying to relocate to a better firing position. The shot took him mid-stride, and he collapsed behind the rocks. His companions immediately began suppressing Sarah's general direction with automatic weapons fire, but they were shooting blind into the storm. Their muzzle flashes only served to give Sarah better targeting information for her follow-up shots within 2 minutes. The third position was silent by this point. The enemy forces had realized they were being systematically eliminated by an unseen sniper, but the storm made it nearly impossible to locate her position. Sarah could see through her scope that some of the remaining fighters were abandoning their positions, falling back to more defensive postures, or attempting to flee entirely. She continued working through the target list with clinical efficiency. The fourth position controlled a key choke point that any extraction helicopter would need to pass through. 5 fighters with rocket-propelled grenades posed a significant threat to any aircraft attempting to reach. Team 7, Sarah eliminated them in rapid succession, her shots coming so quickly that the surviving enemy forces began to panic. The storm was actually working in her favor now. The limited visibility that made her shots so challenging also prevented the enemy from coordinating an effective response. Radio intercepts indicated confusion and fear among the hostile forces as their carefully planned ambush disintegrated around them. 7 actual. This is Extraction 1, a new voice came through Sarah's earpiece. We have visual on your position and are beginning our approach. Enemy fire appears to be minimal at this time. Sarah could see the helicopter through her scope, a black silhouette against the storm clouds as it maneuvered toward the compound. She shifted her attention to the remaining enemy positions that could threaten the extraction. Prioritizing targets based on their ability to engage the aircraft, the 5th enemy position was a mortar team that had been dropping rounds near Team 7's defensive perimeter. Sarah's first shot eliminated the gunner, and her second took out the ammunition bearer before he could service the weapon. The remaining fighters in that position fled into the storm without attempting to continue their mission. As the extraction helicopter settled into the compound, Sarah maintained overwatch on the surrounding area. Enemy fighters who had survived her systematic elimination were retreating in disarray, but a few die-hard elements were still attempting to engage the rescue operation. She spotted movement. On a ridgeline 1,100 meters away, a fighter with an RPG preparing to target the helicopter. The range was at the extreme limit of her equipment's capabilities, made even more challenging by the continuing storm conditions. Sarah calculated wind speed, bullet drop, and target movement, then waited for the perfect moment. The shot broke clean, and the enemy fighter dropped his weapon and collapsed. The RPG rolled down the rocky slope harmlessly as the helicopter completed its extraction of Team 7. Extraction complete, the pilot reported. 8 souls on board, 3 wounded but stable. We are clear of the landing zone. Sarah watched through her scope as the helicopter disappeared into the storm clouds, carrying Commander Morrison and his team to safety. The entire engagement had lasted less than 25 minutes, during which she had neutralized 12 enemy positions and eliminated approximately 30 hostile fighters. She began breaking down her equipment, packing the specialized rifle and optics into their protective case. The extraction plan called for her to move to an alternate pickup zone 3 kilometers away, where a second helicopter would collect her once Team 7 was safely away from the area. As she moved through the rocky terrain, Sarah reflected on the mission. The shots had been challenging but well within her capabilities, thanks to her unique spatial processing abilities and the advanced equipment developed for the Ghost Protocol program. What struck her most was how naturally the complex calculations had come to her. Under pressure, the second helicopter found her at the designated coordinates, and within minutes she was airborne and heading back to friendly territory. Through her headset, she could hear radio chatter confirming that Team 7 had reached the medical facilities at the forward operating base and that all personnel were expected to make full recoveries. 18 hours later, Sarah was back in Admiral Steele's office, once again wearing her crisp administrative uniform and carrying a tablet full of routine correspondence. To anyone observing, she appeared to be the same efficient aide who had managed Steele's schedule for the previous 6 months. "Lieutenant Chun," Steele said as she entered his office, "I've read the after-action reports from Team 7, Commander." Morrison specifically mentioned that the precision and timing of the sniper support was unlike anything he had experienced in 20 years of special operations. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. "I'm glad the mission was successful, sir. 8 good men are alive today who might not have been otherwise." Steele studied her carefully. "The official record will show that Team 7 was extracted during a break in the weather that allowed for air support. There will be no mention of a sniper or any other special assets." "Understood, sir." Steele moved to his window and looked out at the Pacific Ocean. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about seeing patterns that others miss. I'm curious about how someone develops that kind of capability." Sarah joined him at the window. "Sir, I think some people are just wired differently. They see mathematical relationships in physical systems, process spatial information in ways that aren't typical. The Ghost Protocol didn't create those abilities, it just gave me a framework for using them effectively." "And now you're content to return to administrative duties?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Sir, the best special operations are the ones that never officially happened. I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I was trained to do. If another situation arises where my particular skills are needed, you'll know how to reach me." Steele nodded and returned to his desk. "Very well, Lieutenant. I have a meeting with Pacific Fleet Command in an hour. Can you make sure the briefing materials are ready?" "Of course, sir." The files are already prepared and waiting in the conference room. As Sarah left his office to handle the routine tasks that filled her days, Steele found himself looking at his aide in an entirely new light. She had just pulled off one of the most remarkable sniper missions in military history, saving 8 American lives in conditions that should have made precision shooting impossible. Tomorrow, she would go back to managing his calendar and coordinating his meetings as if nothing had happened. The storm over Yemen had passed, leaving behind clear skies and no trace of the extraordinary events that had unfolded in its shadow. In his final report to Naval Special Warfare Command, Steele would note that Team 7 had been successfully extracted due to favorable changes in weather conditions and effective use of available assets. He would never mention the young woman who could see patterns in chaos and make impossible shots in absolute darkness. Some secrets, Steele reflected, were worth keeping outside his window. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, calm and peaceful under the California sun. But Admiral Steele now knew that beneath the surface of his orderly command, there were depths he had never imagined and people with capabilities that defied conventional understanding. The next time impossible became necessary, he would know exactly who to call. Sarah Chun continued her work.